In our previous video, we saw how we could drag these ball sprites into an image sprite, and we could recognize which balls are colliding with the image sprite, and we can add those, we can have those balls essentially add something to a list. In this video, we're going to make the Save button work. When we click the Save button, we want to be able to enter a molecule name, like water, and then choose Save. And we're going to save all of the elements that were added to the image sprite to our TinyDB database when that happens. So we already have the UI components. I'm simply going to go back to Blocks View, and I'm going to make a handler for this button called Save. So we go to Save, and we say When Button Save Click. Okay, now we have this list called molecules, and we just need to iterate over the molecules, and we need to save them into the database along with a tag name. And remember, a tag name is going to be something that's unique. So the tag name that we're going to use is the molecule name, like water. So I've already dragged a molecule or a TinyDB element onto my screen. So for that, I just went down to Storage, grabbed TinyDB, dragged him onto the screen, and renamed him Molecule. I did that in a previous video. So here what we're going to do is I'm going to go to Blocks View, and when button save click, okay, there are two things I need. The text that the user entered into our text box here, which I need to rename that, don't I? Okay, so we're going to call that text box. We're going to call it txt molecule name. That'll make it a whole lot easier back on Blocks View when we're designing this now. So now go back to Blocks View. Okay, I also need to iterate over this list called molecules. I need to do both of these things. So what I'm going to do first is I'm basically going to make a new text variable. So I'm going to go to Variables, and I'm going to say Initialize Local, and we are going to call this All Elements. Elements 2, and then for this we're going to create a new empty list. So create empty list. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I said string, didn't I? Right, we're going to make that a string. So let's start with an empty string. We'll just initialize it as an empty string. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to iterate over our list. Remember, iterate, like looping, is where we do the same activity to multiple things. So I'll say for each item in list, and now what list? This thing called global molecules. Okay, now I'm speaking quickly, so let me just remind you, global molecules is a list. That's this guy right here, where we're adding each of our molecules to this list as we drag them to the image sprite. So by the time we've hit save, we should have several elements in that list. Okay, now with TinyDB, we can only really store tag value pairs. So while I'd like to store a whole list, and maybe we could, but while I'd like to store a whole list, we could also store it as a string. So what I will do here is I'm going to say, okay, we're going to say set all elements to, okay, and then we need to do a little bit of string concatenation. So we're going to use the join operation in string. We're going to say join, okay, item, and then remember that delimiter I talked about earlier, how we can use a delimiter. I'm going to use a delimiter here, which is just going to be basically the pipe. That's the vertical bar that's above the enter key on a US keyboard. Okay, so I am assembling one string that's just going to be a pipe delimited collection of all of these elements. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to, I'm going to grab our TinyDB, okay, and I'm going to say store value. We will do this right here after we've iterated over our collection. Okay, what's the tag? The tag is the text that the user entered into txt molecule name. So let's just look for txt molecule name.text. So that would be something like water, hydrogen peroxide, some kind of word. Okay, and what are we actually going to store in there? Okay, we're going to store this all elements, this string concatenation. We're going to associate that all elements with our with the text name that we have. Okay, we won't really see a whole lot of stuff here because we're just going to have the save button and we don't have any kind of confirmation. The real confirmation will come when we have the user try to guess what element is in, what elements make up a certain molecule. So what I will do for the moment is I'll just show a notification so that we can get some kind of confirmation. I'll borrow something I already have. And I'm going to say notifier, and notice is going to be added, but we're going to need to do another one of these joins because we're going to have a whole bunch of things that we're adding here. So I go to text, and I'm going to grab our join again. There we go, there's our join. Okay. And I'm going to just assemble this over here. It's going to be a little bit easier if I do that. Okay, added, and then space. Whoops, added, space. And then we're going to copy the tag, which is the element name that the user entered. So Control-C, Control-V on that. Okay, and now let's join a few more. I can join multiple strings by just adjusting the join widget like this. So added molecule name, and then we're going to say text, and then we'll say with elements. Okay, and with elements, we're going to get this all elements variable that we've seen here. So get all elements, like so. Now let me save and let's try this out. Okay, fingers crossed. So I'll drag a carbon. Okay, carbon added, that looks good. And looks like we added 2 carbons there. So oxygen added and 2 carbons, and I'll call this carbon dioxide. Whoops, spell it correctly. Okay, and whoops, and then we're going to choose save. And let's see what we get. Added carbon dioxide with elements oxygen. Well, looks like I might be missing something there. Okay. So I'm going to go down. Did I set up my loop correctly? For each elements and global molecules, set all elements join get item. Okay. And then a bar. I see what I'm missing, a little concatenation operation. I was just talking about joining multiple strings, and that's what we need to do here. So I'm going to add a third item, which will be, just a moment, the existing list of elements. There we go, the existing list of elements, and then the new item, and then a bar as a delimiter. Okay, let's try this. This might work a little bit better. So in other words, in the previous loop, I was always just replacing the existing all elements variable with whatever the last element was. In this case, I'm saying, okay, join the current element with all previous elements. That's the part I was missing. So let me go ahead and save, and let's see how this looks in the emulator. Okay, and I might want to reset the emulator here just a moment. Okay, so I have my 2 carbons and my oxygen. I'm going to go ahead and save. And let's see what we get now. There we go. Okay, I need to clear things out. It put in too many elements, but that's just because I was dragging them in and out. Nonetheless, now we see it is properly assembling together our string. So we have these delimited strings now stored in our database. In our next video, what we're going to do is we're going to read from that database, and we are going to put an element name, or rather a molecule name up at the top, and ask the user to guess what the molecule is, what its constituents are. We'll see you then.